When my son's wife told me to leave their house, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't even argue. I just smiled, a small, tired smile that came from somewhere deep inside me, a place I didn't even know existed anymore. And in that moment, standing in the doorway of the home I had helped them buy, I realized something. I had spent 40 years giving everything I had, my time, my money, my health, my dignity, and now at 72 years old I was being called a burden. I remember her exact words. "Dad, we think it's time you find your own place. We need our space. The kids need their space. And honestly, we can't keep doing this." She didn't say it with anger. That's what hurt the most. She said it so casually, like she was asking me to pick up groceries, like my presence in their life was just an inconvenience they had finally decided to address. My son stood behind her, silent. He didn't look at me. He looked at the floor, at the walls, at anything but his own father, the boy I raised alone after his mother passed, the boy I worked 3 jobs for so he could go to college, the boy who promised me when I got old that I would never be alone. That boy was now a man who couldn't even meet my eyes. I didn't pack that night. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too much, not from anger, from something else. Something that felt like waking up from a very long sleep, a sleep that had lasted decades. I sat on the edge of the guest room bed, my bed done for the past 3 years, and I stared at the walls. Walls I had painted myself when they moved in. Walls that had heard my late-night prayers, my quiet tears, my whispered hopes that things would get better, but they never did. And that night, for the first time in 40 years, I asked myself a question I should have asked a long time ago. When did I stop being a father and become a wallet? When did my love turn into a transaction? When did my son stop seeing me as a person and start seeing me as a problem to solve? I don't know when it happened, but I knew sitting there in that room that it had happened, and I knew something else too. I knew I had let it else too. I knew I had let it happen. I had allowed it. I had smiled through it. I had convinced myself that sacrifice was love, that giving until you had nothing left was what good fathers did. But I was wrong. This is my story, a story of 40 years. 40 years of giving, of bending, of breaking, and finally of learning to stand again. My name is Robert Chen. I'm 72 years old now, but my story really begins much earlier. It begins with a young man who believed in hard work, family, and doing the right thing. That young man was me, and I spent my whole life trying to live by those values. I was born in a small town. My parents were immigrants. They came to this country with nothing but hope and 2 suitcases. They worked in factories. They cleaned offices at night. They saved every penny so that I could have a better life than they did. And I promised them I would. I promised I would make them proud. I met my wife, Linda, when I was 23. She was a teacher, kind, gentle. She had this way of making everyone around her feel important, feel seen. We got married a year later. It was a small wedding, just family and a few close friends. We didn't have much money, but we had each other, and back then that felt like enough. Our son, Mail, was born 2 years after we got married. The moment I held him in my arms, everything changed. I looked at his tiny face, his little fingers wrapped around mine, and I made a silent promise. I would give him everything. I would work as hard as I needed to. I would sacrifice whatever it took. He would never struggle the way my parents did. He would never feel like he didn't belong. Linda was an amazing mother. She read to Michael every night. She helped him with his homework. She went to every school event, every parent-teacher meeting. She made our small apartment feel like a home. And I worked. I worked long hours at the factory during the day. I drove a taxi at night. On weekends, I did odd jobs, painting, plumbing, whatever people needed. I was tired all the time, but I didn't mind. Because every time I came home and saw Michael's face light up, every time Linda hugged me and told me she was proud of me, I knew it was worth it. I knew I was doing the right thing. Michael was a good kid, smart, curious. He loved building things. He would spend hours with his toy blocks, creating towers and bridges. He would show them to me with so much pride. And I would tell him he was going to be an engineer one day. He would laugh and say, "Really, Dad? You think so?" And I would ruffle his hair and say, "I know so." When Michael was 10, everything changed. Linda got sick. It started with headaches, then fatigue. Then, one day she collapsed at school. The doctors said it was cancer, aggressive, fast-moving. They gave her 6 months. She lasted 4. I remember the last time I spoke to her. She was in the hospital, weak, pale, but she still had that gentle smile. She took my hand and said, "Robert, promise me something. Promise me you'll take care of our boy. Promise me you'll make sure he's happy, that he knows he's loved." I promised. I promised with tears streaming down my face. I promised even though I didn't know how I was going to keep that promise. Because how do you fill the space left by someone like Linda? How do you be both a father and a mother? How do you work enough to pay the bills and still be present enough to raise a child? But I tried. God, I tried. After Linda passed, I threw myself into work even harder. I took on more shifts, more jobs. I needed the money for Michael's school, for his clothes, for his future, but I also needed the distraction. Because when I stopped working, when I sat still for even a moment, the grief would catch up to me, and I couldn't afford to fall apart. Not when Michael needed me. Michael struggled after his mother died. He became quiet, withdrawn. He stopped showing me his creations. He stopped talking about his dreams. I tried to reach him. I tried to sit with him to talk to him, but I was so exhausted, so overwhelmed. And I think in some ways I failed him during that time. I was there physically, but emotionally I was drowning in my own pain. The years passed. Michael grew up. He did well in school. He got into a good college. I was so proud. I remember the day he got his acceptance letter. He came running into the house, waving the envelope, shouting, "Dad! Dad, I got in." It was the first time I had seen him truly happy since Linda died, and I cried. I cried tears of joy and relief. College was expensive, very expensive, but I didn't care. I took out loans. I worked even more hours. I sold our car and took the bus. I moved us into a smaller apartment to save on rent. None of it mattered because Michael was going to college. He was going to have opportunities I never had. He was going to make something of himself. During those college years, Michael and I grew a little closer again. He would call me every week, tell me about his classes, his friends, his plans. And I would listen, exhausted but happy, knowing that all my sacrifices were paying off, that he was building a good life. Then, in his final year, he met Sarah, his future wife. He told me about her with such excitement. "Dad, she's amazing, she's smart, she's beautiful, she has big plans. I think she's the one." I was happy for him. I wanted him to find love, to build a family of his own, to have what I had with Linda. I met Sarah a few months later. She was polite, well-dressed, confident. She talked a lot about her career goals, her plans, her expectations. She asked me about my work, and when I told her I worked at the factory and drove a taxi, I saw something flicker in her eyes, something I couldn't quite name at the time, but I brushed it off. I told myself I was imagining things. Michael graduated. I was there, sitting in the crowd, my heart bursting with pride. He walked across that stage, took his diploma, and for a brief moment, he looked out into the audience and found me. He smiled, and I smiled back. In that moment, I felt like everything had been worth it. They got married a year later. It was a big wedding. Sarah's family paid for most of it. They were wealthy. Her father owned a business. Her mother was involved in charity work. They lived in a nice house in a nice neighborhood. And I could tell from the way they looked at me that they thought I didn't quite belong. But I didn't care. I was there for Michael, for my son. After the wedding, things started to change. Slowly, at first, Michael called less. When he did call, the conversations were shorter, more distant. He was busy, he said, building his career, building his life with Sarah. I understood. I told myself that's what happens when children grow up. They move on, they start their own families. But then Sarah got pregnant, and suddenly I was needed again. They called me one evening. Michael sounded tired, stressed. "Dad," he said, "we need your help. Sarah's struggling with the pregnancy. We both work full-time. We're trying to save for a house, and we need help. Could you maybe move in with us for a while, just until the baby comes, just to help out?" I didn't hesitate. Of course I would help. That's what family does. That's what fathers do. I packed my things. I left my small apartment, and I moved into their spare room. I thought it would be temporary, a few months, maybe a year. I had no idea it would be 3 years. 3 years that would teach me the hardest lesson of my life. The first few months were good, or at least I thought they were good. I tried to be helpful without being in the way. I cooked meals, I cleaned the house, I did the grocery shopping. I wanted to make things easier for them. Sarah was pregnant and uncomfortable. Michael was working long hours. I told myself I was doing what any good father would do. When the baby came, a little girl named Emma, everything shifted again. She was beautiful, tiny, perfect. I held her in my arms and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose, joy. This was my granddaughter. My blood, a part of Linda living on in this new little person. I helped with everything, night feedings, diaper changes, rocking her to sleep when she cried. Sarah went back to work after 3 months. Michael was always busy, so I became Emma's primary caregiver, and I didn't mind. I loved it. I loved watching her grow, her first smile, her first laugh, her first steps. I was there for all of it, but somewhere along the way, something changed. The gratitude I used to see in Michael's eyes started to fade. The thank yous became less frequent, and Sarah started to look at me differently, not with appreciation, but with something else, something that felt like irritation. It started with small comments, little things. "Dad, can you not leave your shoes by the door? It looks messy." Or Dad, we need the living room tonight. We're having friends over. Maybe you could stay in your room? I would smile, I would nod, I would do what they asked because I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to overstay my welcome, but the comments kept coming, more frequent, more pointed. Sarah would sigh when I asked questions. She would roll her eyes when I offered suggestions. And Michael, my own son, started avoiding me. He would come home from work, say a quick hello, and disappear into his room with Sarah. They would close the door, and I would sit in the living room alone, listening to the muffled sound of their voices, wondering when I had become an outsider in their home. One evening I made dinner, a recipe Linda used to make, chicken with rice and vegetables. It was one of Michael's favorites when he was growing up. I spent hours preparing it. I wanted to do something nice, something to remind him of better times, of home. When they came to the table, Sarah looked at the food and frowned. "Robert, we're trying to eat healthier. This is too heavy, too much oil." Michael didn't say anything. He just nodded in agreement. I felt my face flush with embarrassment. I apologized. I said I would make something different next time, something lighter. But the next time I cooked, Sarah found another problem. Too bland the time after that. It didn't matter what I made, it was never right. So eventually, I stopped cooking for them. I would make something simple for myself and eat alone in my room. They didn't seem to notice. Or maybe they did, and they were relieved. Money became another issue, a bigger issue. When I first moved in, I offered to help with expenses. I had my small pension and some savings. It wasn't much, but I wanted to contribute. Michael said no at first. He said I was helping enough just by being there, by taking care of Emma, but after a year, things changed. They wanted to buy a house, a bigger house, in a better neighborhood. Sarah talked about it constantly. She showed me pictures on her phone, beautiful homes with big yards and modern kitchens. "This is what Emma deserves," she would say. "Every child deserves to grow up in a nice home." One evening, Michael came to my room. He looked uncomfortable, nervous. He sat down on the edge of my bed and said, "Dad, I need to ask you something. I know you have some savings, and I know this is a lot to ask, but we're short on the down payment for the house. We need about $20,000 more. Could you help us out? We'll pay you back, I promise." I looked at my son, at the lines of stress on his face, at the hope in his eyes, and I thought about Emma, about giving her a good home, a good life. Isn't that what I had always done? Given everything for my family? So I said yes. I took out $20,000 from my savings, money I had been saving for years, for emergencies for my old age, and I gave it to them. Michael hugged me. He thanked me. He said I was the best father anyone could ask for. And in that moment, I felt good. I felt like I had done the right thing. They bought the house, a beautiful house, 4 bedrooms, a big backyard, in a quiet tree-lined neighborhood. I helped them move in. I painted rooms. I assembled furniture. I worked until my back ached and my hands were covered in blisters, but I didn't complain. Because this was for my family. My room in the new house was smaller than the one in the apartment. It was in the basement, no windows, just a small bed, a dresser, and a lamp. Sarah said it was temporary, just until they could finish the other bedrooms. But months passed, and nothing changed. The basement became my permanent space. I tried not to let it bother me. I told myself, space didn't matter, that I should be grateful to have a roof over my head. But some nights, lying in that dark room, listening to the sounds of the house above me, I felt a loneliness I hadn't felt since Linda died. The requests for money didn't stop. A few months later, Michael came to me again. They needed a new car. Sarah's car was old and unreliable. "Dad, we can't risk Sarah breaking down on the road with Emma in the car. We need something safe, something dependable. Could you help us with the down payment? Just $5,000. We'll pay you back with the next bonus." I gave them the $5,000. And then there was the credit card debt, just $3,000, Dad. We got behind on some bills. We'll pay you back next month. I gave them the $3,000. And then there was the family vacation. Emma needs to see the world, Dad, make memories. We're short on funds. Could you chip in? Just $2,000. I gave them the $2,000. Each time they promised to pay me back. Each time I believed them because they were family, because Michael was my son, because I trusted him, but they never paid me back, not once. And when I gently mentioned it months later, Sarah would snap at me. "Robert, we're struggling here. We have a mortgage, daycare costs, bills. We can't just hand you money whenever you ask for it." As if I was the one being unreasonable, as if I was the one asking for handouts. Michael would stay silent during these conversations. He would look away, change the subject, and slowly I realized something. I realized that to them, I wasn't family anymore. I was a resource, a bank account, something to be used when convenient and ignored when not. Emma turned 2. She was walking now, talking. She called me Papa. It was the one bright spot in my life. When she would run to me with her arms up, wanting to be held, I would forget about everything else. The loneliness, the disrespect, the financial strain. In those moments, it was just me and her, and it was enough. And But Sarah started to pull Emma away from me, literally. Emma would be playing with me, laughing, and Sarah would scoop her up and say, "Come on, sweetie. Let's go upstairs. Papa needs his rest." She said it in a sweet voice, but I heard the message underneath. Stay away from my daughter. I started to notice other things too. They would have family discussions without including me. They would make plans without telling me. I would hear them talking in the kitchen, and when I walked in, they would stop, change the subject, look at me like I had interrupted something private. One afternoon, I came upstairs and found them looking at brochures. Senior living facilities, retirement homes. My heart dropped into my stomach. Sarah saw me staring and quickly gathered up the papers. "Oh, Robert, we were just looking into options, for the future, just in case." Just in case of what? I wanted to ask. Just in case I become too old, too inconvenient? But I didn't say anything. I just nodded and went back downstairs. That night, lying in my basement room, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I calculated how much money I had given them over the years. The down payment for the house, the car, the credit cards, the vacation, the groceries I paid for, the utilities I contributed to. It came to almost $40,000. $40,000 that was supposed to be for my future, for my care when I got too old to take care of myself. And now that money was gone, and I was living in a basement, being treated like a stranger in a house I had helped buy. I tried to talk to Michael. One evening I asked him if we could speak privately. We went into the backyard. It was a warm evening. The sun was setting. I took a deep breath and I said, "Son, I need to ask you something. Do you still want me here? Because if I'm in the way, if I'm a burden, you can tell me. I'll find somewhere else to go." Michael looked surprised. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "Of course we want you here, your family." But his words felt empty, like something he was saying because he was supposed to say it, not because he meant it. "Then why do I feel like I don't belong here?" I asked quietly. "Why do I feel like I'm invisible? Like I'm only useful when you need something from me?" Michael's face hardened. "Dad, that's not fair. We're doing our best. We have a lot on our plate. We have Emma. We have work. We have bills. We can't drop everything to make you feel included all the time." "I'm not asking you to drop everything," I said. "I'm just asking to be treated like I matter." "You do matter," he said, but there was an edge to his voice now, frustration. "But you have to understand. Sarah and I, we need our space. We need to live our lives, and sometimes having you here, it's complicated. Complicated. That was the word he used. I was complicated. I didn't say anything else. I just nodded and went back inside, back down to my basement room, and I sat on the edge of my bed and I realized something. I realized that no matter how much I gave, it would never be enough. Because they didn't see me as a person anymore. They saw me as an obligation, a problem to be managed, and that realization broke something inside me, something I didn't know could break. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. I remember because Tuesdays were the days I usually picked Emma up from daycare. It was one of the few things I still did that made me feel useful. I would walk the 4 blocks to the daycare center, sign her out, and walk her home. She would hold my hand and tell me about her day, about the games she played, the songs she learned. Those walks were precious to me, but that Tuesday when I arrived at the daycare, the teacher looked confused. "Mr. Chen, Sarah already picked up Emma about an hour ago. Didn't she tell you?" "No, she hadn't told me." I stood there feeling foolish, feeling forgotten. I thanked the teacher and walked home alone. When I got back to the house, I found Sarah in the kitchen. Emma was sitting at the table, eating a snack. "I went to pick up Emma," I said quietly. "But you had already gotten her." Sarah didn't even look up from her phone. "Oh yeah, I left work early." "I figured I'd grab her myself. You could have told me," I said. "I walked all the way there." She finally looked at me, and there was no apology in her eyes, no guilt, just annoyance. "Robert, I don't have to run everything by you. She's my daughter. I can pick her up when I want." Something in her tone made my chest tighten. "I know she's your daughter. I thought we had a routine." "I thought, that's the problem," she interrupted. "You think too much. You think you're entitled to things, to Emma, to our time, to our gratitude. But the truth is, Robert, we've been carrying you for 3 years now. 3 years of having you in our space, in our home, and honestly, we're tired." The words hit me like a physical blow. I looked at Emma, who had stopped eating and was watching us with wide, confused eyes. I looked back at Sarah, searching for some sign that she didn't mean what she was saying. But her face was hard. "Cold carrying me?" I said slowly. "I've given you everything. I took care of Emma while you both worked. I gave you money, $40,000, Sarah. Money I saved for my entire life. Money you gave willingly." She shot back. "Nobody forced you. You wanted to help, and we appreciated it. But that doesn't mean you get to hold it over our heads forever." I'm not holding anything over anyone's head, I said, my voice shaking now. I just want to be treated with respect. With basic human decency, Sarah stood up. She crossed her arms. You want respect? Then stop acting like a victim. Stop moping around this house like we owe you something. We've given you a place to live, food to eat. We've included you in our lives, and it's never enough for you, is it? I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight. My eyes were burning. I'm hoping Michael would appear, hoping my son would defend me, but he wasn't there. He was upstairs, probably hearing every word, and he wasn't there. I think, Sarah said, her voice quieter now, but no less cold. It's time we had a serious conversation. Michael and I have been talking. We think it's time you found your own place. We need our space. Emma needs her space, and you need your independence. This arrangement isn't working anymore. This arrangement, I repeated. The words felt bitter in my mouth. Is that what I am? An arrangement? Don't tire? You know what I mean. We're grateful for everything you've done, but it's time. We'll give you a month to find somewhere. That's fair, isn't it? Fair? She was asking me if it was fair after 3 years of giving everything I had, after raising their daughter, after emptying my savings, after sleeping in a basement. She was asking if 1 month was fair. I didn't answer. I turned and walked downstairs to my room. I closed the door, and for the first time in years I let myself cry, not quiet tears, not dignified tears, but deep, shaking sobs that came from a place of pure pain, pain I had been holding in for so long. I cried for my wife, for Linda, who would have been heartbroken to see what had become of our son. I cried for the years I had wasted thinking sacrifice meant love. I cried for my own stupidity, my own blind, for believing that giving everything meant anything. When I finally stopped crying, I sat in the silence of that basement room, and I made a decision I would leave. Not in a month, sooner, because staying here in this house and this family that had stopped seeing me as a person was killing me. Slowly, quietly, but killing me nonetheless. The next morning I started looking for apartments, small studios, 1-bedroom places, anything I could afford on my pension, but the numbers didn't make sense. Rent was expensive, much more expensive than I remembered, and my savings were gone, almost all of it. I had maybe $5,000 left, enough for a deposit and 1 month's rent, maybe 2 if I was lucky. I felt panic rising in my chest. How had I let this happen? How had I given away so much that I couldn't even afford to live on my own? Michael came to see me that evening. He knocked on my door. I told him to come in. He stood in the doorway, not quite entering, not quite leaving, Dad, he said. Sarah told me about yesterday, about the conversation. I waited for him to tell me she was wrong, that I wasn't a burden, that I was welcome to stay as long as I needed. But those words never came. I think, he said slowly, she might be right about you finding your own place. I think it might be good for you, independence, freedom. You've been taking care of people your whole life. Maybe it's time you took care of yourself. The words sounded rehearsed, like something Sarah had told him to say. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and I saw a stranger, a man I didn't recognize, a man who could stand there and tell his father to leave without a hint of shame in his eyes. When did you stop caring about me? I asked. My voice was steady, calm. When did I become something to get rid of? Michael flinched. That's not fair, Dad. I do care about you. But you have to understand, I have a wife, a daughter. I have to think about them first. And I'm not part of that? I asked. I'm not family? You are, he said. But it's different now. We need to think about what's best for our immediate family, for our household. As if I wasn't part of it, as if 3 years meant nothing. I raised you alone, I said quietly. After your mother died, I worked 3 jobs. I gave up everything so you could have a good life, so you could go to college, so you could have opportunities. And now when I need you, when I have nothing left, you're telling me to leave. Michael looked down at his feet. I know you sacrificed a lot, Dad, and I'm grateful, I really am. But I can't live my whole life repaying you. At some point, I have to live for myself. I'm not asking you to repay me, I said. I'm just asking you to see me, to treat me like I matter. You do matter, he said, but the words were hollow, empty. I think this is what's best for everyone. He left after that. He didn't hug me. He didn't say he loved me. He just left. And I sat there in that dark basement room and I felt something inside me shift, something fundamental. The man who had spent his whole life believing in family, in sacrifice, in doing the right thing, that man died in that moment. And someone new was born, someone who finally understood the truth that giving everything doesn't make people love you. It just makes them expect more. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed and I thought about my life, about Linda, about the promises I made her, about how badly I had failed, not because I didn't try hard enough, but because I had tried too hard. I had given so much that there was nothing left of me. And now when I needed someone to give back, there was no one. The next morning I made some calls. I called a few old friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years because I had been too busy being useful. Being needed, one of them, David, an old colleague from the factory, said he had a spare room. His wife had passed a few years ago. His kids lived in another state. He was lonely. He said I could stay with him for a while just until I figured things out. I thanked him. I almost cried with relief because finally someone was offering me help without expecting something in return. I didn't tell Michael and Sarah right away. I spent a few more days in that house, watching them, really watching them. I watched how Sarah barely acknowledged me when I walked into a room, how Michael avoided eye contact, how Emma, sweet Emma, was being taught to keep her distance from Papa. One evening, I was sitting in the living room. Emma came running down the stairs. She saw me and smiled. Papa, she started to run toward me, but Sarah called out from the kitchen. Emma, come here, sweetie. Leave Papa alone. Emma stopped. She looked confused. She looked at me, then at her mother, and then she turned and ran to the kitchen, away from me. That was when I knew I couldn't stay even one more day, because if I did, I would disappear completely. I would become a ghost in this house, present but invisible, there but not seen. I went downstairs. I packed my things. I didn't have much, some clothes, a few books, a photo album with pictures of Linda and young Michael, pictures of better times. I put everything into 2 suitcases, the same number my parents had when they came to this country. And in that moment, I understood them in a way I never had before. I understood what it meant to start over, to leave behind what you thought was home and step into the unknown. Not because you wanted to, but because you had to, because staying meant losing yourself. I called David. I told him I was ready. He said he'd pick me up the next morning. That night, I wrote a letter. I wrote it to Michael. I told him everything I had never said, about the hurt, the disappointment, the betrayal. But I also told him I forgave him, not because he deserved it, but because I needed to let go. I needed to release the anger that was eating me alive. I ended the letter with this: I hope one day you understand what you've lost. Not money, not a caregiver, but a father who loved you more than his own life. And I hope when Emma grows up, she treats you better than you treated me. Because, son, you will be old one day too, and you will need someone to see you, to value you. And I pray she does. I really do. I left the letter on the kitchen table, and the next morning before anyone woke up, I left. I walked out of that house with my 2 suitcases. David was waiting in his car. He helped me load my things. He didn't ask questions. He just drove. As we pulled away, I looked back at the house one last time. The house I had helped buy. The house where I had been called a burden, and I felt something unexpected. Relief. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe. David's house was small, modest, nothing like the big house Michael and Sarah owned, but it was warm. And more importantly, I was welcome there, really welcome. Not as a resource, not as someone to use, but as a friend, as a person. The first few days were strange. I kept waiting for David to ask me for something, for money, for help, for my time. But he never did. He just made coffee in the mornings. We sat at his kitchen table and talked about old times, about work, about loss, about life. My wife passed 3 years ago. He told me one morning, cancer, similar to what your Linda had, and my kids, they call once a month. Maybe they have their own lives, their own families. I used to be angry about it, hurt. But then I realized something. I can't control how other people treat me. I can only control how I treat myself. I thought about his words, really thought about them, and I realized he was right. I had spent my entire life trying to earn love through sacrifice, through giving, but love doesn't work that way. Real love isn't transactional. It isn't something you purchase with money or time or suffering. It's something freely given, or it's nothing at all. Michael called me 2 days after I left. I was sitting in David's backyard when my phone rang. I stared at his name on the screen for a long time before I answered, Dad. His voice was tight, strained. Where are you? You just left without saying anything. We found your letter. I said everything I needed to say in that letter. I replied calmly, you can't just leave like that. What about Emma? She's been asking for you. She doesn't understand where Papa went. Something twisted in my chest at the mention of Emma. But I kept my voice steady. You and Sarah made it clear I wasn't needed anymore. I was respecting your wishes. That's not what we meant, he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. We just thought. We thought you'd be happier with your own space. We weren't kicking you out, weren't you? I asked quietly. Because that's exactly what it felt like, Michael. You took my money, you took my time, you took 3 years of my life. And when there was nothing left to take, you wanted me gone. There was silence on the other end, a long, heavy silence. Then he said, I'm sorry you feel that way. Not I'm sorry for what I did, but I'm sorry you feel that way. as if my pain was just a feeling, just a perception, not something real, not something not something valid. Michael, I said, and my voice cracked just a little. I spent my entire life trying to be a good father to you. I worked myself to exhaustion. I gave you every opportunity I never had, and all I ever wanted was for you to see me, to value me, not for what I could give you, but for who I was, Dad. Let me finish, I said. I'm not angry anymore, I'm just sad. Sad that you became someone I don't recognize. Sad that I let myself believe sacrifice was the same as love. But I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to shrink myself down to make you comfortable. I'm not going to apologize for existing. I deserve better than that, and deep down I think you know I do. Another silence. Then quietly, where are you staying? With a friend, someone who sees me as a person, not as a problem. Can we meet? Talk about this? I closed my eyes. Part of me wanted to say yes. Part of me wanted to believe things could change, that Michael would suddenly understand, suddenly care. But I knew better now. Not yet, I said. I need time. I need space to figure out who I am outside of being useful to you. And you need time to think about what kind of man you want to be, what kind of father you want to be to Emma. Dad, please take care of yourself, Michael, and take care of that beautiful little girl. Teach her about kindness, about respect, about seeing people for who they are, not what they can give you. Because if you don't, one day she'll treat you the way you treated me. And trust me, son, that will break your heart. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. But I also felt something else, something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I felt free. Michael called a few more times over the next week. I didn't answer. He sent text messages, short ones at first, then longer ones, apologies, explanations, promises that things would be different. But I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because I needed to focus on myself, on healing, on rebuilding. David helped me find a part-time job, nothing strenuous, just a few hours a week at a local library, shelving books and helping visitors. The pay was small, but it was enough. Combined with my pension, I could afford a small apartment, a place of my own. I moved into that apartment after a month at David's one-bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a living room with a window that looked out onto a park. It was simple, peaceful, and it was mine. Nobody could tell me I didn't belong there. Nobody could make me feel small. I furnished it slowly, a bed, a table, a comfortable chair. I put up the photos of Linda and young Michael, not out of bitterness, but because they were part of my story, part of who I was, and I wasn't going to erase that. I started doing things I hadn't done in years. I went for walks in the park. I read books. I joined a senior community center and took a painting class. I was terrible at it, but I didn't care. Because for the first time in decades, I was doing something just for me, not for Michael, not for Emma, not to be useful, but because it brought me joy. I made new friends, other seniors who had their own stories, their own struggles. We would sit together, drink coffee, and talk about life, about regrets, about second chances, and I realized something. I wasn't alone in my own. So many of them had similar stories, children who took and took until there was nothing left. Families that saw them as burdens instead of blessings. One woman, Margaret, told me about her daughter who put her in a nursing home and never visited. Another man, Frank, told me about his son who only called when he needed money. And as I listened to their stories, I felt both sadness and comfort. Sadness that this was so common. Comfort that I wasn't uniquely foolish, that I wasn't the only one who had loved too much. The thing is, Margaret said one afternoon, we raise them to be independent, to be strong, to think for themselves. And then we're surprised when they do exactly that, when they prioritize their own lives over ours. But there's a difference between independence and cruelty, I said. Between living your own life and forgetting where you came from, there is, she agreed. But some people never learn that difference, and we can't force them to. We can only decide how we're going to live the rest of our lives, in bitterness or in peace. I chose peace. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I lay in bed and thought about Emma, about missing her growing up, about all the moments I would never see, her first day of school, her first lost tooth, her first everything. Those thoughts hurt. They hurt deeply, but I reminded myself of something. I reminded myself that staying in a place where I wasn't valued, where I wasn't seen, wouldn't have given me those moments either. Because Sarah was already pulling Emma away from me, already teaching her that Papa didn't matter. So by leaving, I hadn't lost Emma. She was already being taken from me. At least now I had my dignity. I had my sense of self. I had a life that was mine. 3 months after I moved into my apartment, I got a letter, not a text, not a phone call, but a handwritten letter. The return address was Michael's house, but the handwriting wasn't his, it was Sarah's. I stared at that envelope for a long time before I opened it. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to not let them back into my life, even through words. But another part of me, the part that was still a father, needed to know what it said. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single page. The handwriting was neat, formal. It read, Robert, I'm writing this because Michael asked me to. He's been struggling since you left. He doesn't sleep well, he barely eats, he keeps saying he made a terrible mistake, that he treated you in a way you didn't deserve. I'm not going to lie and say I understand everything. I still think we needed space. I still think the situation was complicated. But I can see now that we could have handled things differently, that we could have been kinder. Emma misses you. She asks about you every day. She doesn't understand why Papa doesn't come to see her anymore. And honestly, I don't know what to tell her. If you're willing, we'd like to see you. Not to ask for anything, not to ask you to come back, but just to talk, to let Emma see you, to try to make things right. I know we hurt you, and I'm sorry for my part in that, Sarah. I read the letter 3 times. I looked for the trap, the hidden request, the ulterior motive, but I couldn't find one. It seemed genuine, or at least as genuine as Sarah could be. I didn't respond right away. I thought about it for days. I talked to David about it, I talked to Margaret and Frank, and they all said the same thing. Do what feels right for you, not for them, for you. What felt right for me was complicated. Because I did miss Emma. I missed her laughter, her little hand in mine, her bright eyes when she learned something new. But I also knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. I couldn't be the free babysitter, the ATM, the invisible man living in the basement. So I wrote back a short letter. I was willing to meet, said I was willing to meet, but not at their house, at a neutral place, a park, for 1 hour just to see Emma, just to let her know Papa still loved her. But I made it clear, this didn't mean things were fixed. This didn't mean I forgave everything. This was just a first step, and what came after depended on them. We met the following Saturday at a park near my apartment. I arrived early. I sat on a bench and watched the children play. My heart was racing. I didn't know what I was going to say, what I was going to feel. Then I saw them. Michael and Sarah walking toward me, and between them, holding both their hands, was Emma. She looked bigger than I remembered. Her hair was longer. She was wearing a pink dress with flowers on it. I'm un for tinfo. When she saw me, her face lit up. Papa! She broke free from her parents and ran toward me. I stood up just in time to catch her as she jumped into my arms. She wrapped her little arms around my neck and squeezed tight. I missed you, Papa, she said. Bah. Where did you go? I missed you too, sweetheart, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Papa just needed to go live in his own house for a while. Maybe someday, I said. I looked up at Michael and Sarah. They stood a few feet away. Michael called her, tire. Tired. Tag. There were dark circles under his eyes. Sarah looked uncomfortable, nervous. I set Emma down gently. Why don't you go play on the swings for a bit, sweetheart? Papa needs to talk to your mommy and daddy. She nodded and ran off toward the playground. The 3 of us sat down on the bench. For a moment, nobody spoke. Finally, Michael broke the silence. Dad, I don't even know where to start. I've been going over everything in my head, everything I said, everything I did. And I'm ashamed. I'm so ashamed. I didn't say anything. I just waited. You were right, he continued, about everything. We did use you. We took advantage of your generosity, your love, and we gave you nothing in return. Not respect, not gratitude, not even basic human decency, and I don't have an excuse for that. I was selfish. I was blind. I was a terrible son. His voice cracked. Tears started to fall down his face. You raised me better than that. Mom would be so disappointed in me, and I'm disappointed in myself. I felt my own eyes burning, but I didn't cry. Not yet. Why? I asked. Why did you treat me that way? Michael wiped his eyes. I don't know. I think I started seeing you as a given, like you would always be there, always willing to help, always willing to give, and I took that for granted. I stopped seeing you as my father, as a person with needs and feelings. I just saw you as someone who was supposed to make my life easier. And now, I asked, now I see what I lost, he said quietly. I see that you gave me everything, and I gave you nothing, and I don't know if I can ever make that right, but I want to try, if you'll let me. I turned to Sarah. And you? She looked down at her hands. I was wrong, too. I was stressed, overwhelmed, and I took it out on you. I made you feel unwelcome in our home, in our family, and that wasn't right. You didn't deserve that. I nodded slowly. Thank you for saying that, both of you, but I need you to understand something. I'm not coming back. I'm not going to live with you. I'm not going to be your caregiver or your bank account. I have my own life now, my own home, and I'm not giving that up. We don't want you to, Michael said quickly. We just want to be in your life, to see you, to let Emma know her grandfather, to maybe over time rebuild what we broke. I looked over at Emma. She was on the swings, laughing, her hair flying behind her, and I felt a deep ache in my chest. because I wanted that too. I wanted to be part of her life, but I also knew I had to protect myself. I had to set boundaries. If we're going to do this, I said, it has to be different. You have to respect me. You have to see me as a person, not as a convenience. And you have to understand that trust isn't rebuilt overnight. It takes time and effort and consistency. We understand, Michael said, and we're willing to do whatever it takes. We talked for a while longer about practical things, about how often we could meet, about keeping things simple at first, about not making promises we couldn't keep. It wasn't a perfect conversation. It was awkward and painful and full of hurt that couldn't be erased with words, but it was a start. When Emma came back, I hugged her one more time. I told her Papa loved her very much, that I would see her again soon. She smiled and kissed my cheek, and for a moment, just a moment, everything felt right. They left after that. I watched them walk away, Emma between her parents swinging their hands, and I felt something complicated. Not happiness, exactly. Not sadness either, something in between, something like hope, but cautious hope, guarded hope, because I had learned my lesson. I had learned that loving people doesn't mean losing yourself, that giving doesn't mean giving everything, that family is important, but so is self-respect. I walked back to my apartment, back to my small, simple space, and I looked around at what I had built, a life that was mine, where I wasn't someone's burden, where I wasn't invisible. I had lost 3 years living in that basement. I had lost $40,000. I had lost my sense of self, but I had gained something too. I had gained clarity. I had gained strength. I had gained the knowledge that I was worth more than how useful I could be to others. And that knowledge, painful as it was to acquire, was worth everything. It's been 8 months since that day in the park. 8 months of slow, careful steps towards something that might one day look like healing. Michael and I meet once a week now, sometimes at a coffee shop, sometimes at the park. Sometimes I go to their house for Sunday lunch, but I never stay long. I never let myself fall back into old patterns. I'm a visitor now, a guest, not a resident, not someone they can take for granted. The first few visits were stiff, awkward. We didn't quite know how to talk to each other. Years of hurt don't disappear just because you want them to, but slowly we found our way. We talked about small things at first, the weather, Emma's progress at preschool, my painting classes, nothing deep. Nothing that would reopen wounds that were still raw. But as time went on, we started having real conversations. Michael told me about the pressure he felt, the stress of trying to provide for his family, the fear that he would never be good enough, never successful enough. And I listened, really listened, not as someone who needed to fix things, but as someone who understood what it meant to carry weight you didn't know how to put down. I told him about my own struggles, about the loneliness I felt after Linda died, about how I threw myself into work and sacrifice because I didn't know how else to show love, about how I lost myself in the process of trying to be everything to everyone. And in those conversations, something shifted. Michael started to see me not just as his father, but as a human being, someone who had made mistakes, someone who had fears and doubts, someone who was trying his best with limited tools and endless love and a PX2. Not friendship exactly, but understanding. She apologized more than once for her part in everything, and I could see she meant it. She explained that she felt threatened by me, that she worried Emma would love me more than her, that she saw my presence as a reminder of her own inadequacy as a mother. I know that's not rational, she said one afternoon, but feelings aren't always rational. I felt like I was competing with you, and instead of dealing with that like an adult, I pushed you away. I made you the enemy. I was never your enemy, I told her gently. I just wanted to help, to be part of Emma's life. I know that now, she said, and I'm sorry I couldn't see it then. We're not close, Sarah and I, we probably never will be, but we're civil, respectful, and that's enough. Emma is the bright spot in all of this. She's 4 years old now, full of energy and questions and math. Every time I see her, she runs to me with that same joy she had when she was younger. Papa and I scoop her up and hold her close and feel grateful for these moments. These second chances. I teach her things, small things, how to tie her shoes, how to count in different languages, how to plant seeds in little pots and watch them grow. And she listens with wide eyes and asks 1,000 follow-up questions, just like her father used to when he was young. Sometimes when we're sitting together, just the two of us, she'll look at me very seriously and say, "Papa, I love you." And my heart feels so full it might burst. "I love you too, sweetheart," I always say, so very much. I haven't gotten my money back, the $40,000 Michael has mentioned paying me back. He's brought it up a few times, but I've told him not to worry about it. Not because I don't need it. I do. My finances are tight, very tight. but because I don't want money to be part of our relationship anymore. I don't want him to feel like he owes me, like our connection is transactional, the money is gone. That's a fact I've had to accept. It was a hard lesson, an expensive lesson, but a lesson nonetheless. I learned that you can't buy love, you can't buy respect, you can't sacrifice your way into someone's heart. Real relationships aren't built on what you give, they're built on mutual care, mutual respect, mutual seeing of each other's humanity. I've built a good life for myself now, a quiet life, a simple life, but a life that's mine. I still work at the library a few hours a week, I still take painting classes. I've even joined a book club, a group of seniors who meet every month to discuss whatever we're reading. David is still my closest friend. We have dinner together twice a week. We watch baseball games. We complain about our aching joints and laugh about getting old. He's become like a brother to me. Family I chose, not family I was born into or obligated to, but family built on genuine affection and care. I've learned to be alone without being lonely. I've learned to enjoy my own company, to sit in silence without feeling like I need to be useful, to exist without needing to justify my existence through service. These are lessons I wish I had learned earlier. When I was younger, when Linda was still alive, maybe we could have traveled more, rested more, enjoyed each other more, instead of always working, always sacrificing, always preparing for a future that never quite arrived the way we thought it would. But I can't change the past. I can only live in the present. And the present, imperfect as it is pretty good. Last week, Michael asked me something. We were sitting at a coffee shop. Emma was with Sarah at a doctor's appointment. It was just the two of us. He stirred his coffee for a long time before he spoke. "Dad," he said finally, "do you forgive me?" I looked at him, really looked at him, at the gray hairs starting to show at his temples, at the lines on his face, at the weight of regret in his eyes, and I realized something. He was carrying his guilt like I had carried my sacrifice, like a burden he thought he deserved to hold forever. "Yes," I said, "I forgive you." His eyes filled with tears. "How? After everything I did, everything I said. How can you forgive me?" "Because," I said slowly, "holding on to anger was killing me. It was eating me from the inside out. And I decided I didn't want to spend whatever time I have left being bitter, being angry. I want to spend it at peace. I don't deserve your forgiveness," he whispered. "Maybe not," I said honestly. "But I'm not giving it to you because you deserve it. I'm giving it to you because I deserve peace. And forgiveness is how I get there," he cried then, right there in that coffee shop. And I reached across the table and held his hand, and we sat like that for a while, father and son. Both broken in different ways, both trying to put the pieces back together. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if Michael and I will ever have the relationship we once had, or if we'll build something new, something different but still meaningful. I don't know if Sarah will ever truly see me as family, or if I'll always be somewhat on the outside. I don't know if Emma will remember these years with me, or if it'll just be a vague memory when she's older, but I know this. I know I did the right thing by leaving, by choosing myself, by refusing to disappear into someone else's needs and expectations. That decision saved my life. Maybe not literally, but in every way that matters. I also know that healing is possible, not complete healing, not perfect healing, but enough healing to move forward, to rebuild, to find connection again without losing yourself in the process. I'm 72 years old. I don't know how many years I have left. Maybe 10, maybe 20 if I'm lucky. Maybe less, but however many years I have, they're going to be mine. Lived on my terms, with my dignity intact, with my self-respect restored. I think about Linda sometimes, about what she would say if she could see me now. I think she'd be proud, not of the pain I went through, but of how I came out the other side, how I chose life over bitterness, hope over despair, peace over resentment. "You did good, Robert," I imagine her saying. "You finally learned to take care of yourself." And I think I did. Finally, after all these years, I learned. There's a saying I heard once, something David told me. He said, "You teach people how to treat you. They're, you too." For most of my life, I've taught people that I didn't matter, that my needs weren't important, that they could take and I would keep giving. I taught them that through my actions, through my endless sacrifice, through my inability to say no. But I'm teaching a different lesson now, to Michael, to Emma, to myself. I'm teaching that everyone deserves respect, that everyone's needs matter, that love without boundaries isn't love, it's self-destruction. And maybe, just maybe, if I teach Emma this lesson now while she's young, she'll carry it with her. She'll know that she matters, that she doesn't have to shrink herself to make others comfortable, that she can love people without losing herself. That would be a good legacy, better than money, better than sacrifice. A legacy of self-worth, of dignity, of knowing that you are valuable simply because you exist. not because of what you can give. I sit in my apartment now, in my comfortable chair by the window, and I watch the sun set over the park. The sky is painted in shades of orange and pink and purple. It's beautiful, and I'm here to see it, not working, not sacrificing, not making myself useful, just being, just existing, just appreciating this moment. And that, I've learned, is enough. I am enough, just as I am, with all my flaws and mistakes and regrets. I am enough. It took me 72 years to learn that lesson, but better late than never. If you're reading this story or listening to it, and you see yourself in it, if you're the one who gives and gives until there's nothing left, please hear me. Please learn from my mistakes. It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to say no. It's okay to take care of yourself first. That's not selfish. That's survival. And if you're the one who's been taking, if you've been treating someone in your life the way I was treated, it's not too late to change. It's not too late to see that person, to value them, to treat them with the respect they deserve. Before they're gone, before the damage is too deep to repair. Family is important, love is important, but so is self-respect, so is dignity, so is recognizing that every person, no matter their age, no matter their usefulness, has inherent worth. Remember that, hold on to that, live by that. I smile as the last rays of sunlight disappear below the horizon. Tomorrow I'll see Emma again. We're going to the zoo, just the two of us. Michael asked if I wanted to take her for the afternoon, give him and Sarah some time to themselves. And I said yes, because I want to, because it brings me joy, not because I'm obligated, not because I owe them, but because I choose to, and that choice, that freedom to choose makes all the difference. I stand up from my chair, I stretch my old, tired bones, and I make myself a cup of tea. I put on some quiet music, and I sit back down to enjoy my evening, my peaceful, simple, beautiful evening. After 40 years of giving everything, I've finally learned to give to myself. And it turns out I was worth it all along. I was always worth it. We all are.